This man is the renowned expert. He'll be humble and disagree, but I'm sure everyone in the circle of knowledge will agree. He is the renowned expert on Patrick Cleburne, on the Battle of Franklin, on the fight of secession and freedom, righteous liberty in Middle Tennessee during the war against the Federals. And this man probably still answers calls in his sleep from the History Channel. You want another interview? Can you be on this show? This man's ideas and memory is in TV show. I watched the show come on the other day from the late 1980s, early 90s, and there's Thomas, almost a full head of hair, darker, talking about Patrick Cleburne, doing an excellent job. And this man is a hero to all those who know him. He has dedicated his life passionately to the education of our Confederate cause, specifically the Battle of Franklin, the struggle there, the people there, the town there, the fight to survive, and the aftermath of the battle there is horrible. And of course, the life of General Patrick Cleburne. He has made several journeys across the pond to trace the birth, steps, and lineage of Cleburne in Ireland. And I've had the honor of killing Yankees next to him on battlefields and dying with him on battlefields across the country. And we'll keep our slogans to ourselves that we've said in battle.
Please.
And save that for another time. But without further ado, we are honored here tonight to have our keynote speaker, Brother Thomas Cartwright from the Chaplains.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's a great honor and pleasure and privilege to be here this evening. By the way, I want to say hello to Mars Ed Butler. Hey, Ed. Hey. Ed's out there right now. Hey, Ed. God bless. I love you, Ed. But thank you so much for allowing me to be here this evening. It's a great honor in this beautiful setting, by the way. Just beautiful. And of course, the subject tonight is General Patrick Ronan Cleburne. That's how I pronounce it. Now, by the way, Alabama pronounces it Cleburne County, Alabama. Texas pronounces Cleburne. Arkansas pronounces it both ways. And Ireland both ways. So everybody's right. How about that? Everybody's right. How many times did that happen, by the way? Please forgive me. Let me just have a little sip of water with this. As General William Hardee would later write, yeah. Can I walk around? I have the microphone on. Is that?
That's for the camera.
Okay.
This is for the speakers here.
Okay.
So.
Okay. Now I understand.
Yes, sir.
General William Hardee would write at the end of the war that friend and foe soon learned to watch the course of the blue flag with a white moon that marked the spot where Cleburne's was in battle. Where their numbers defended, no odds broke their lines. Where their numbers attacked, no odds ever resisted their onslaught, save only once, and there is the grave of Cleburne and his gallant division. Robert E. Lee would write note after the war that Cleburne on our side inherited the trepidation of his race. On the field of battle, he shone like a meteor on a clouded sky. His character was unmatched, and the care which he took of his men from the greatest to the least was incessant. And Dublin Nation's Irish newspaper would write after his death that there were eyes afar that watched the stars that rose to the Southern Cross. There was hearts that bled when his course was sped, and old Ireland felt your loss. Yes, on St. Patrick's Eve or St. Patrick's Day, his grave says the 17th, but nonetheless, Patrick Ronan Cleburne was born. It's a conspicuous omen that it wasn't that it was planned his name to be Patrick, but on that St. Patrick's Eve or St. Patrick's Day, a conspicuous omen. He was very shy among strangers, but cheerful and merry among family. He loved to hunt by the River Bride with his rifle, and he found books and brooks and tongues and trees and goodness and everything. He hunted with his dogs. His father was a doctor. Yes, on his father's side, they came from way back, came to Ireland in the 1400s, 1500s, and they were known as the poor man's friend. His father was a doctor. poor man's friend. And they took care of the Irish, and they paid for their lands too. They were not given their lands. And his mother, her and her side, Celtic warriors from from 1,000. Yes, he never spoke about that, never mentioned that at all. And they moved to Grange from Ovens Township near Broadbark Cottage, where he was born. I guess we had the honor to, in '94, to place a bronze marker on his birthplace, and we're very proud of that. And also, there's a bridge now named Cleburne Sweeney Bridge, because Fighting Tom Sweeney was from Cork as well. And so, at 15 years old, his father died, and of course, as it's noted, he failed the test for medical test twice. Why did he do? Why did he fail? He had a dislike for Latin and Greek. Why? Reverend Spedding, School for Young Boys. He believed in the Burt Switch. Now, Claiborne loved geography, English, history, the classics, but he didn't. Reverend Spedding did not stimulate him to want to learn Latin and Greek. And by the way, we just talked about at the table later on the war. We're going to get to the war certainly. But nobody abused his men. Nobody abused his men. One man, he found one of his soldiers carrying a log. So what's happening? His objective to discipline is brain them up, make them better, not grind them in the mud, aka Braxton Bragg. We have on our side too. He ain't no Bragg, no hero of mine. I can tell you that. How many little boys are named Braxton Bragg today? I don't think too many. Yeah, and but he thought like you said, ashamed his families are listed to go off to India, British 41st Foot Regiment. Their museum in Cardiff, Wales now. And of course, they came back. Let's move on up to his mother. His mother died when he was 15 months old. And his adopted mother, Isabella, just like a mother to him, they decided they want to come to America. You know what? The victors write the history books, don't they? Now, how many times have we been told our whole lives that the Irish famine, the potato famine, that's why they came to America? Potato famine. Well, yes, there was a potato famine, but Ireland was producing enough food to feed themselves 3 times over. Guess where it was going? To England. England. The Queen of England offered 10,000 pounds. The King of Turkey offered 15,000, and they said that'd be an insult to the Queen. Yeah, they're taking all the food. Not many people know that, do they? Mm-hmm. And so the troubles in Ireland, he served 4 years, and he said one officer, Colonel Pratt, who later became a brigadier general, wanted him to stay. He had a lot of qualities, but he said, at best, I'm going to be a petty officer, detested by the inferiors, and looked down by the inferiors, and detested by the inferiors. And you can't, you had to buy your way out up. So they decided to come to America. Opportunity, and on pardon me, November 7th at Cove Harbor, the bridge town, left with he and his adopted mother and 2 brothers, brother and sister, and they left 47 days at sea. They arrived at New Orleans on Christmas Day. He had a letter of introduction because he worked as an apothecary in Melancholy, and he learned the trade. He had a letter of introduction, but he wanted to try to make it on his own. So his family was still in New Orleans. He took the boat up the river to Cincinnati, Ohio, and they followed soon thereafter. And apothecary, a little store apothecary. He knew how to make medicine and prescriptions. He never run a business. Said, try me, see what you think I'm worth. He made it a great success. Then Dr. Nash and Dr. Grant had a store, had apothecary in Helena, Arkansas. And here we go. That's where fate comes in. He goes down the river to Helena, Arkansas, where he arrived in 1850, and I think May of 1850. And for the next 11 years, he would be in Helena, Arkansas. And noting at the table how he met failure, but he wouldn't give up. He learned from it. Failure and taking the medical exams. When he came to Helena, Arkansas, he never fired a pistol, or he practiced. They laughed at the gawky Irishman at the dances because he didn't know how to dance. He took dancing lessons. And never ridden a horse a lot. Threw him into the mud, and they joked about that later on in the war. And he made that store very successful, apothecary, mercantile in Helena. He bought half ownership in it, and then sold the store, and the American dream in it. Well, I think it makes America great. They guarantee you nothing except the chance to be successful and the right to be free. Got a chance, no guarantees ever, but a chance. And it was a great success. Bought lands, and it became a lawyer. Studied law, became a lawyer. He had every reason for looking forward to the future and what happens. The war clouds appear upon the horizons. He wrote in his letter to his brother Joseph that I am with the South in life or death, victory or defeat. I never owned a Negro, cared nothing about it, but these people have been my friends, have stood up for me on all occasions. He was a strict constitutionalist. When he was in the British Army, he studied Hannibal. And by the way, I liked elephants, by the way. I had to study Hannibal growing up. But he used Hannibal tactics. He used have you ever any of you ever studied the Battle of Cannons? That's where Hannibal destroyed the Roman Sixth Legion, I think. Anybody ever study that? Double envelopment movement. He crushed 70,000 Romans. And crushed them. Only about 10,000 got away. Killed the rest of them. And guess what? I'm getting ahead of myself. Pat Cleburne used those tactics at Richmond, Kentucky. Same thing. Double envelopment movement and crushed Bull Nelson. But I'm getting way ahead of myself. And so. 1861, he enlisted in the Yale Rifles, 1st Arkansas, that later designated the 15th Arkansas. He was elected captain, and from there promoted to colonel. And from there, they went to Missouri for a little excursion, and then we come back to Nashville Fallen. He comes through Nashville, and then the Army of the Mississippi are redesignated. They're going to consolidate at Corinth, Mississippi. And they're the first major battle of the war for General Cleburne and the Army of the Mississippi, commanded by General Albert Sidney Johnston. I love Albert Sidney Johnston. He was never proven because he died at Shiloh. I think it was a terrible loss. Dr. Charles Rowland, a great historian that lived to be 103 years old. I've been on the battlefield of Shiloh many times with Dr. Rowland. He said it was a terrible loss. Great book on Sidney Johnston, too, by Dr. Rowland. At the Battle of the Bulge, great historian. And he's gone now, across the rivers now as well. But Cleburne, his artillery, the artillery wasn't his command. After Shiloh, it left him at Shiloh. And from then on, artillery was always underneath his command. He always performed his own reconnaissance. Never depended on anybody else. There was no reconnaissance going on when they hit the field at Shiloh. After that, Cleburne always performed his own reconnaissance, know the ground in front of you. And also, he developed his sharpshooters on the field at Shiloh. He went in with 2,700 men. I hope I'm not going to forget the regiments. Let's see. The 6th Mississippi, 23rd Tennessee, across the road by the Shiloh Church, it would be the 5th Tennessee, the 2nd Tennessee, 24th Tennessee, and skirmishers as the 1st Ark or 15th Ark of skirmishers. They went in with 2,700 men, and they lost over 1,000 in that 2-day battle. Over 1,000 casualties, 1,043, I believe, and they were in the Shiloh Church, driven. They were end up with 800 men the second day. By the way, I'm ashamed to say in the past I wouldn't study Shiloh the second day. Didn't work out for us, and I was 100% wrong. We received 200 reinforcements, 200 men, and they received 26,000. And Sherman didn't think he could hold his lines the second day. Bragg ordered Cleburne to attack her in a Water Oaks Pond. He only had 800 left, and he said direct orders these orders are not whatever he said. These orders are not discretionary. He obeyed orders, and there was a debacle. Sherman was driven back over a mile the second day past Water Oaks Pond. But with reinforcements, Sidney Johnston had died. After the end of that, I don't blame Beauregard at the end of that first day. They'd been out all day long. It was 6 o'clock. They had 2 brigades left. And if you study the ground at Shiloh and all those artillery up there, it wasn't going to happen. It wasn't going to happen. Sidney Johnston was 700 yards from his objective, that river. 700 yards when he was wounded. By the way, not about Sidney Johnston tonight, but the mini ball hit him right back here. What is that artery called? Popliteral, P-O-P-L-O-T-E-R-A-L. But anyway, it nicked it. If it severed it, it would have clotted. It nicked it. It was bleeding. He didn't even know he'd been wounded. And then Beauregard, they took 2 hours to find him. Here we go. And then they said Cleburne, where they're withdrawing to Shiloh, he knelt by a soldier that was mortally wounded, had deep, deep, kind words for him. Pull back to Corinth, Mississippi. On his grave, it says Farmington. That's at Corinth, Mississippi. Nobody knows what was the big thing was at Farmington. But from there, of course, the Kentucky Campaign of 1862, and I think there's so many great days for General Cleburne. We'll get into his character in a while, but one was Richmond, Kentucky. He had it in for Bull Nelson. Does everyone know who Bull Nelson is? If you don't know, you're not missing anything. Bombastic. He's a bully, 6'4", big man for back then, 225, 30 pounds, and a bully. And Cleburne had it in for him about Shiloh. He said there's very few cases of more reckless inhumanity than this, and that's where Bull Nelson ordered Lexington Tiger gunboats every 15 minutes firing these huge shells into the battlefield, killing their own men, killing everybody, just indiscriminately, just firing everywhere. Cleburne had it in for Bull Nelson, and then in his report he said that we sent Bull Nelson back to Louisville with a bullet in his leg. And he received the thanks for the Confederate Congress for his actions at Richmond, Kentucky. That was one of his greatest days, but there were a lot of great days. With the Kentucky campaign, of course, Perryville. Let's try again. At Richmond, Kentucky, he was wounded in the ankle. At Perryville, Kentucky, I consider General Cleburne a tactical genius. He studied Hannibal. He studied Alexander Great's campaigns. He disliked Ulysses Napoleon, by the way. Might add that. But at Perryville, on the field, usually, with the color bearers, you have the main body, right? The Hill, Jackson's brigade was up there, Federal, most called Union. He sent the color bearers up with the skirmish line. They open up, they fall down. Cleburne's main body got to crush them. And that was on the field. That's a tactical genius right there. But then he was wounded in the cheek, spit out some teeth. Thank God it was a spent bullet, or we wouldn't be talking about him tonight. He would have died there, and he couldn't speak. He gave his command to someone else, an officer. And so twice in the Kentucky campaign, they withdraw back in time to Murfreesboro. And about October, they arrived at Murfreesboro. How many of you know that General Cleburne had a pet raccoon? Pet raccoon was with them, and they went. I don't know when he tagged up with them, but they said that the raccoon would stay in the tent with officers and they jump in the tent with Cleburne. And there's an article about his pet raccoon, and it stayed with him until Stones River. They tried to get him out of a tree when they were withdrawing. They couldn't get him out of a tree, and there's at the end of the raccoon. They called him. Oh, I forget his name. I just saw his name the other day. I cannot remember his name now, but nonetheless, he loved wildlife. He loved animals. He loved nature as well. And from there, they withdraw back to the Cleburne's command. He promoted division commander. Please forgive me. On December the 7th of 1862, from brigade to division commander, they're camped at College Grove. And then, of course, the day after Christmas, Rosecrans Federal Army, most called Union, started that camp movement toward Murfreesboro, down the Murfreesboro Pike, the Franklin Road, and the Knowlesville Road. And of course, Cleburne's division was at College Grove. They sent Sam Wood's brigade to slow them down, while the whole Army of Tennessee is concentrating at Murfreesboro. And who's out in front on just almost like Shiloh, except it was December 31st, not April 6th, when the Confederate Army came out of that fog. With Hardee's Corps, Cleburne's in the vanguard, and not just Cleburne's and Hardee Corps, but they crushed the Federals. McCook's old chucklehead, as Ed Barrs called him, McCook's wing was crushed on the Franklin Pike. They're driven them back to what the park is now, the Last Stand. That's about 700 yards. It's a tough little nut area, sort of like Gettysburg in a way, that fish hook kind of thing. And then attack and counterattacks and attacks all through that round forest. And Cleburne's division captured many battle flags. He noted there's no general I've ever read his reports that noted his men more than Cleburne. The sergeants, the privates, the corporals, the line officers. And if he didn't remember their name, he would say the regiment. And those men knew that. One of the many great traits of Patrick Cleburne? Sort of like the patron saint. He always led by example. Furthermore, all the credit belonged to his noble division, never himself. All the credit belonged to them, and they knew it too. And they end up being shock troops in the Army of Tennessee, never took a backward step unless ordered to do so. We'll get to Chattanooga in a little while. And and they were shock troops, never took a backward step. They go into camp for 6 months. The Confederate Army of Tennessee is after Stones River. There's about a 20-mile gap between the Federal Army at Lebanon, Murfreesboro, Franklin, et cetera, and then the Confederate Army was about 25 miles south at Sparta, Tullahoma, War Trace, Bell Buckle, and Columbia. And there's that excursions back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And there, Cleburne, he trained his officers. He had a little schoolhouse, and he would train them, and then he'd get them to repeat it back to him. And then they would go down the line, officers. And he didn't care too much about their clothing, but he demanded that their weapons and equipment always in good order and they're clean. This one boy, I think his name was Webster, he was notorious for coming up to the roll call with he's filthy, hands dirty, face dirty, his weapon filthy. And Cleburne's going down the line looking at the weapons. He never even looked at him. He just looked down at the weapon, not even looking up to the boy. He said, I hope you don't take offense to this, but I don't think you've washed your face and hands in days. And he's looking at the weapon that's absolutely filthy, and he hands it back to him. They said he never came to roll call again with a dirty weapon or a dirty face and hands. You know, yeah. Sir Arthur Mantle Freeman, how you pronounce that? Sir Arthur, the English colonel that came, Fremantle. He came to visit them at that time. So he was commenting how well trained they were. Well trained. He had minute knowledge of the English Enfield rifle. And by the way, so admired that they presented him a sword at War Trace. They, through the blockades, have been engraved with the Harp of Aaron and shamrocks on it. That's in the Atlanta History Center, I think, today, by the way. And the Tullahoma campaign began in June of '63, June 26th. And there's a little battle. They're all big to me. If one person is shooting at me, that's a major war. And it doesn't have to be Gettysburg or Shiloh or D-Day or Fallujah or Abbey Gate if they're shooting at me. But they call Liberty Gap. General Villick, the federal general, he said this will be called a skirmish, but there's very few skirmishes in history of warfare more severe than this. And they inflicted on the Tullahoma campaign. It's a master move for Rosecrans, that campaign. He lost about 574 men all the way to Chattanooga. Half of them were at Liberty Gap. And they had those sharpshooters, Whitworth rifles out there, pegging them as well. But with Bragg in command, Tullahoma had extensive trenches. All Rosecrans did was flank them and start that withdrawal, a hard withdrawal through Monteagle Mountain, and then, of course, all the way to Chattanooga, and then withdrew Chattanooga into Chickamauga. I can name 8 battles of war with any nighttime fighting, any kind of major ones. And Cleburne was in a bunch of them. Chickamauga's one, as well as Pickett's Mill. We'll get to that Atlanta campaign. And once again, Cleburne on the second day, and Hardy course, Cleburne, George A. Thomas didn't think he'd hold his lines. That was a diversion, but it was such a hard attack, and it threatened that there were running reinforcements over where Cleburne's attacking them. And then, of course, we know the center was Pierce at Brotherton, Lafayette Road, and the Brotherton Farm all the way to Snodgrass Hill, and of course the Federals withdrew. By the way, there was a Confederate soldier captured and taken to Chattanooga, but he escaped on the way. Went back to his captain and said the Yankees are retreating. They're retreating. Told the colonel, went up to a general, and they took him to old Cyrus Face Bragg's tent. And Bragg listened to him, and he said, "Sir, do you really know what a military retreat looks like?" He said, "Well, I should, General Bragg. I've been with your army for the last year and a half." The generals even laughed about that. Bragg sent him on his way. Cleburne came, and his command came within a hair's breadth of going to the Army of Northern Virginia. Right before Chattanooga, where Grant would attack, they were on the train going to Cleveland, Tennessee, and then all the way to Army of Northern Virginia. and they stopped them. Half on Bushrod Johnson, and another brigade went on up to Virginia. There where he stayed the rest of the war. They had a Hardy Corps flag at Petersburg in '64, by the way, but the rest were called back. And could be one of the greatest days in Cleburne's career. Missionary Ridge on the right, which they now call Sherman's Reservation. Yeah, the shortest report in the history of war, I think. Sherman was right after he had his brains kicked in. I'm not being biased. We attacked, we fell back, we went into the camp. Yeah, and Cleburne on the right, he repelled. Sherman had 30,000 men, and they're attacking in piecemeal fashions. And it was a magnificent defense set up with Keyes Arkansas Battery, and had where they could shift back and forth and back and forth. And they captured 7 battle flags, killed or mortally wounded 4 generals, and they inflicted something like almost 2,000 casualties on them. And they repelled them. They went back into camp and saved the army on the right. And then here we go. Cleburne's division was going to, along with Gist's brigade, was supposed to take up the rear guard. And here we come to Chickamauga Creek. This is in November of '63. Chickamauga Creek, his orders were to cross the creek, camp, and then move on to Ringo Gap. And he knew that he would lose half his command if they crossed the creek, and they would freeze. So he stayed on this side of the creek, and the next morning had the fires. They crossed and then warmed up. And that's the only time I know of he disobeyed orders the whole war. And moved on. That could be another, the second time he received the thanks of the Confederate Congress at Ringo Gap. That might be the best day of the war for him. But there's a lot of, so many. Another Hooker's command was attacking, and again, disguised Keyes Arkansas Battery and had them attack. Oh, they're going to teach the Westerners how to fight. A lot of Easterners. Oh, they're going to teach these Westerners how to fight. They came up against Cleburne's, and they just annihilated and saved the army. Cleburne's orders were to guard that gap, even if you lose your command. And he thought he was going to lose his command, but he sent a courier to Bragg to make sure in writing what this is. Why did he do that? Why did he take the time to do that? Because Bragg would give orders. There were his orders, his plans. They didn't work, and then he'd blame the officers. They implemented his orders, but that kills your initiative, doesn't it? And he made sure, he thought he was going to lose his command. He made sure this was in writing. If I lose my whole division for all this. But he did not lose his division, inflicted terrible casualties. The wagons were going across the hill, and that's when he started pulling back. Recently, about 10 years ago, they found a 33rd Alabama soldier still buried up there, had a part of a canteen over his face in it. And a 33rd Alabama soldier, magnificent, saved the army, received the thanks of the Confederate Congress the second time for that action at Ringo Gap. Have you ever been to Ringo Gap? I urge you to go. It's magnificent. So how many days are there so great? Richmond, Kentucky, Parable, Missionary Ridge on the right, Ringo Gap. And then they go into camp at Dalton, Georgia. And his General William Hardee was his commander, corps commander. And here's a lull in '64 where Hardee he's a widower, but he was marrying a lady from Mobile, Alabama. She's 26 years old. General Hardee was married, and Cleburne was his best man. Well, at the wedding in Mobile, Alabama, he met this lady by the name of Susan Tarleton, 26 years old, and before you know it, they're corresponding. He fell deeply in love, and in time they engaged to be there. He proposed to her in her herb garden in Mobile, Alabama. Susan Tarleton kept up a correspondence, and then we start the Atlanta campaign of 1864. Sherman in April starts the Atlanta campaign. I know you're all historians out here. Nobody owns that title. You studied from little children, almost all of you, and I better not say that because we are being filmed. Yeah. All right. I'll add this. Sam Craighead, he great historian in Virginia. He told me once that with a discussion, I'll say this, that he thought that individuals should receive the information and make up their own minds. The gentleman he was speaking with, he said, well, I agree with the first part. He goes, what do you mean? Oh, no, they don't have the knowledge or the training to be able to make decisions on things like that. They don't have the knowledge. You don't. None of you have the knowledge to make decisions on things like that. That is absolute crock, isn't it? Oh, I come from the ivory tower, so you're not intelligent enough to make decisions about the war or anything. Oh, yeah, right. Yeah, I think they're intimidated because you know too much. You know so much more than they know, and that makes them threatened. Yeah, and I don't know why I went off that diatribe, but Sam Craig was a fine, fine man. He's gone too. He's crossed the river now. And 64, the Atlanta campaign starts. And how many have ever been to Pickett's Mill? It's a haunting place. If I ever felt sorry for any federal soldier, more I did there. They're just send piecemeal. Harker's brigade is moving down and Wagner's as well. They're like a big old hole, and they just in piecemeal. Who's hitting them? Cleburne's. Granbury's Texas Brigade just pounding them, shredding them to smithereens. There's a mass grave in that Pickett's Mill hole down there. They don't even know where the Federals are, and the woods caught on fire, and these wounded are going to be burned up. And Colonel, gosh, I can't remember his name now. Colonel of the First Arkansas, he waved the flag, says, help them. We won't shoot on you, help them. And we'll send our guys out there too. So they called on the flag of truce, and no doubt Cleburne gave him permission to do that. And they helped the wounded Federal soldiers not be burned up, the wounded. And this colonel, the 31st Indiana, brought out a brace of pistols and gave it to this colonel. I'll remember his name before it's over with. And he said, no matter how many victories you have, no whatever, it won't nothing like this. And he's so grateful he saved those men from being burned alive. No doubt Cleburne ordered him to do that. Kennesaw Mountain. That's another great day, Pickett's Mill for Pat Cleburne. Kennesaw Mountain. Remember, he always performed his own reconnaissance after Shiloh. But let's go back to Helena, Arkansas for a moment. He got in a lot of trouble with Thomas Hindman. General Hindman later, he stood up for Thomas Hindman in an altercation, and Cleburne was almost killed over it, shot in, I believe, this area, and he suffered that a long time. So now he's performing his own recon at Kennesaw Mountain, and he goes out of his sector a little bit. A big Hotchkiss shell, artillery shell, flies over his head, and he told the staff officer, we better get out of here. I never knew anybody that jumped into things that wasn't their business. They got in a lot of trouble. And AKA Thomas Hanford, he almost died from that wound there, spitting up blood for a long time from that. He could even catch colds real easy because of that. He never drank. He said one glass of wine affected his chess game. Well, his men did. One regiment. How many of you are familiar with the 5th Confederate? All Irish immigrants out of Memphis, Tennessee. One colonel said of the 5th Confederate, they were the most rascally set of men that ever went unhung, but always ready for a fight. Sometimes they fight themselves more than the Yankees, quote unquote. They smuggle whiskey in their watermelons and their pumpkins and their rifle barrels. I'm sorry, but in the Kentucky campaign, barrels of whiskey were captured. Cleburne had a lieutenant put a guard over it. Who else on the field but the 5th Confederate? He had a real bad feeling, and he went to inspect the barrels of whiskey. Well, who had volunteered to guard the whiskey? But the 5th Confederate. As he said, the barrels were empty, the guards were full. And he placed them under arrest. He told the lieutenant, I thought you had enough sense, Lieutenant, never to place Irishmen in guard or whiskey. They were wonderful lads. They came out of Memphis, Tennessee. They loved the Army. They were dock workers and railroad workers. And they loved the Army. And they loved Pat Cleburne. Even the Army, some people in the Army thought he was biased toward them, toward the Irish. Well, but they withdraw to the Chattahoochee. You have Kennesaw Mountain, and then you have the Battle of Atlanta and Peachtree Creek. Cleburne was a corps commander temporary for just a little while at Jonesboro. And what I noted earlier about his reports, a lieutenant, I think it's Whitaker, but he had his leg nearly blown off at Jonesboro. They're carrying him off the field. He's mortally wounded. And he said, make sure General Cleburne puts me in his report. Make sure he puts me in a report. Nobody could defeat them. They never, again, took a backward step. And remember that blue flag with the white moon? Even Sherman said that flag meant fight. You better believe it. The Federals knew that when that flag's on that field, there's going to be a lot of lead flying. They're so well trained, so well trained. The awful, the terrible, calling that flag there. Yeah, yeah, uh-huh. And of course, the Atlanta campaign, July 17th, 1864. Cleburne admired Joe Johnston, admired him a great deal. July 17th, 1864, General John Bell Hood, Westmoreland class of 53, wounded severely July 2nd, 63, near Devil's Den, Gettysburg. Cannonball fragment rode up his left arm, withered, useless on a sling. 3 months later at Chickamauga, he took a minie ball in the upper right leg, amputated 4 inches from the hip. Only four men lived from that type of operation in the whole war. He lives as a hero, and my opinion, he should not have been back in command. I mean, 4 inches from the hip, that leg was amputated. Wow, he's a very brave man. In my past, some of you know, I've been brutal with General Hood. I was younger, no excuse, but and there's plenty of room to criticize him for tactical and strategic details and mistakes. But he wasn't trying to impress his fiance, General Hood. He wasn't punishing anyone. He was a combat shock troop veteran. He's a combat shock troop veteran. There's a lot to an army beside fighting. Robert E. Lee said he was all line and no fox. Very Forrest, he was a master of logistics, and so was Cleburne. And Cleburne and Hood, there was a tension between them, and Hardee asked to be relieved after Peachtree Creek. He left the army, and Atlanta falls September 2nd, 64. Hood evacuates Atlanta. There's a lull for 2 weeks as Sherman is evicting the citizens of the town. Powder Springs, Georgia. Mary Gay, her brother was Lieutenant T.J. Stokes, her half brother. She had kept blankets and coats and everything for them, and they're at Powder Springs, Georgia, and she and others bring those equipment out to them, blankets and coats and whatever. And General Granbury let her stay in his tent that night. He did not stay in there. And the next day they're leaving and they're cheering Mary, cheering her. When she's out of range, she starts crying because they were so emaciated, so worn out, so tired, so wore out, and she knew the end was near. I mean, a body can only take so long, a human body. But here we go, October 4th, 64, Powder Springs, Georgia. Cleburne's division marches up to his headquarters, serenades the general, asks him to speak. He told them how tough the campaign would be, what would be won if they're victorious, lost if they're defeated. He compared their lot to Ireland's under English rule. And if they lost, their fate would be much worse. And they said he looked up at the starry sky with all the emotion in his heart. And he said that if this cause that is so dear to my heart is doomed to fail, I pray that heaven may let me fall with it, with my face toward the enemy and my arm battling for that which I know is to be right. The Army of Tennessee, the last of a great army, 3 corps of infantry, S.D. Lee's Corps, Clayton and Stevens Johnson's Division, 9,700 strong. Frank Cheatham's Corps, Claiborne Brown Bates Division, 9,300 strong. And A.P. Stewart's Corps, Westmoreland Class 46, W.W. Loring, old blizzards, Loring, Wathall, and French's Division. Total about 27,600 infantry. Claiborne's Division, 3,000 strong. At this time of the war, it's Granbury's Texas Brigade, Govan's Arkansas Brigade, and Lowry's Mississippi and Alabama Brigade, 3,000 strong. Smith's Brigade, Georgians were supposed to be with them, but they never connected with them in time. And the Confederate Army of Tennessee is going through Georgia, capturing Dalton. By the way, 700 and some odd USCT soldiers, black federal soldiers, were captured, and they had never fought USCT soldiers or never seen them really. And so there was a little bit of, sharp words going on, and Cleburne made sure they're protected. Nothing happened to them. I was chastised once by someone who said Confederates never captured USCT soldiers. If they did, they put them in slavery. No, that's not true. That's not true. But that's another story. And then they're moving into Alabama. The Confederate Army of Tennessee, about 34,000 strong, 27,600 infantry, and about 5,000 under Nathan Bedford Forrest. Ross's Texas Brigade, blacked out there. Buford's division. Ross's, let's try again. W.H. Jackson's division, Buse's division, Chalmers division, 5,000 strong. They come. They went across at Decatur, Alabama. A fort was there. Unusually cold weather, winds, and so they moved to Tuscumbia, Alabama. Same thing, high river, the water's high. Moved to Florence, Alabama, and on November 19th, 64, they come into Tennessee. Uh, 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 on November 21st, let's try again. November 19th, across the Tennessee River. November 21st, they come into Tennessee with the initiative. Before Sherman begins his march to the sea, his picnic, he detaches the 23rd and 4th Federal Corps up to Nashville, deploys them south at Pulaski, Lawrenceburg, Waynesboro. There, on or about November 23rd, the two armies come in contact with each other. Forrest cavalry screening the infantry movements. The Federals are falling back. Hard skirmish into Columbia, Tennessee. We just mentioned St. John's earlier. There he dismounts by St. John's Episcopal Church and walk through that churchyard. And he said to himself, overheard by Captain Hill, it would not be too difficult to die if you could be buried in such a beautiful place as this. Exact copy of the church in Ireland where his father is buried, except it's built out of stone in Ireland. This is brick there. And this touch of irony, December 3rd, I think, he would be buried at St. John's Episcopal Church for 5 years. 5 years. He spoke last time to his division and said, we will succeed or we will die, but we will not give up. And Columbia, Tennessee, they flank them. On November 29th, the Confederate Army of Tennessee is up at 2 a.m. on the move at 4 a.m., leaving S.D. Lee's Court in the Duck River with 121 guns and move around the Federals with Cheatham's Corps, Stewart's Corps up to this place called Spring Hill, 13 miles south of Franklin, about 15 miles north of Columbia. One of the most controversial days of the war, and there's a ton of them in it. There was a battle there, 1,000 casualties. The Confederates had the Federal Army trapped. They escaped. How and why has been debated since it occurred. There's not one historian that agrees on everything about Spring Hill. Not one. Even my mentor, Ed Bars, the mentor, I don't agree with Ed Bars on everything about Spring Hill. The bottom line, they escaped. My take, a textbook example of a lack of communicating, overconfidence, and exhaustion. A 12-mile march should have been was 17 miles. And I could go on for a long time about Spring Hill, a long time. But Cleburne moves down the Rally Hill Road, echelon stair-step fashion, with Granbury's, Govans, and Lowry's brigade, and attack the Federals of Bradley's brigade. They fall back. Cleburne on his horse, Red Pepper, and he said, "We'll charge them." And Forrest is right by him with his command. Bell's dismounted cavalry. They crush the Federal right, drive the Federals across the road, the swells, and across the pike, Columbia Pike. And then the orders to halt will bring up the whole corps. And Cleburne thought it was a terrible mistake. He and Bate suggested maybe placing themselves under arrest and let their brigadiers fight it out. They just thought it was too risky. And start this inner stream to Hood's headquarters, Oaklawn, Bate, Cheatham, Forrest, A.P. Stewart, a private soldier, warned him the Yankees are retreating. They're just going on down the pike. And they escaped. That's the bottom line. There was an infamous breakfast at Ripavilla Mansion. Infamous. Cleburne was not there, but Cheatham was there, and Hood was there, and A.P. Stewart was there. S.D. Lee was not there. Some other division commanders, and their Hood was madder than hell. Excuse my language. And he was, quote unquote, wrath is a rattlesnake, striking out at everyone. Yeah, imagine that. And he was bound and determined to recover this lost opportunity. On the march toward Franklin, General Cleburne became aware through reliable channels that he's being blamed for the debacle at Spring Hill. He was going to demand a court of inquiry after the campaign about it. General Brown, John C. Brown, thought, I hope you're wrong. No, they're reliable, but we'll get that later. And here we go. Forrest Cavalry skirmished with the Federal infantry on Winstead Breezy Hills, which is a wonderful spot the SCV has today. Sam Davis Camp, Winstead Hill. They fall back. Updike went back up, fall back. And here comes the Army of Tennessee. Right over those hills, start to pull in a line of battle. Cleburne's division on the east side of the road. Granbury's, Govans, Lowry's in reserve. And of course, on the west side of the road would be Brown's division, Bates division on Brown's left, and of course Stewart's Corps, Warren Wathall's division, connecting with Cleburne's. And General Hood hosts his pre-battle conference meeting at the Harrison House. There, who was there? Cleburne, A.P. Stewart, Cheatham, Forrest, P.C. Wathall, among others. And there, General Hood informs his commanders of his plans for a frontal assault, asks for opinions. Cheatham said, I don't like the looks of this fight. The enemy's position well fortified. Forrest, not once but twice, said, give me a strong division of infantry and my cavalry. I'll flank them out in 2 hours. Forrest was the only commander, to my knowledge, that had been on that field in 1863 and 3 or 4 times and went behind the town. It's conjecture. We're not supposed to go there, but it's hard not to. And then Cleburne said it'd be a useless loss of life what would be accomplished attacking over almost 2 miles of open field against what appeared to be impregnable works. He performed his own recon for the last time of his life, went over the Merrill Hills, that's to your west, and borrowed a telescope from a Whitworth rifle. And he said, there are 3 lines, and they are completed. And he went back to his command. He had his last meeting with his brigadier generals on Breezy Hill, across from Winstead Hill. And there he informed his commanders of his plans for Hood's plans for a frontal assault. What was General Hood's orders? Well, he thought it was too late. His orders were simply this: you were going at right shoulder shift, bayonets fixed, do not fire a shot to overwhelm the advance line, shoot the enemy in the backs, go into the works with them, and you'll drive the enemy in the river at all hazards. That means I'm coming for you. You're not getting across that river before we settle this. Was General Hood making decisions in the afternoon on anchor? Oh, well, he was wrathy in the morning. That's not documented, not noted. There's no proof he was taking drugs. If he was, I don't blame him. With those kind of wounds, and that people ignore this one, it was withered and usually wore gloves the rest of his life. I wouldn't blame him. If he was, that doesn't make him an opium addict if he was taking it sometime. He's not an evil man. He wasn't a cruel man. He wasn't punishing Cleburne's division. There's a lot to an army besides fighting. I don't think he knew logistics and certainly artillery very well. But that's another subject. And Cleburne repeated his orders, Hood's orders at Breezy Hills to his brigadiers. After the meeting, General Govan noticed a very somber look on Cleburne's face. He said, General, it don't look like many of us are going to make it back to Arkansas to tell this fight. And Cleburne's reply was, Govan, if we are to die, then let us die like men. I mentioned earlier is that I've read that he had a death wish or something. That's not true. He's engaged to be married. He had success in Arkansas. He had every reason to live, but he always led by example. Ed Bars, he was guiding groups on the battlefield of Franklin 4 years before I was born. 1952, he was taking groups over Franklin battlefield. And I had the honor to be his chief of staff, so to speak, for the 150th. That was, of course, 2014. And he did his thesis on General Cleburne. I said, what was the greatest traits of General Cleburne? He took care of his men. He always took care of his men. Never dismounted before he took care of his men, as much as he could. Everything was about his men, and that had a lot of benefits. He took care of his men, and so here we go, the last day of General Cleburne's life. That beautiful Indian summer afternoon, about 45 degrees, no wind or breeze whatsoever, dead still. Why is that important? Why is that important? Note there's no wind or breeze. Where's the smoke going to go? It's not going to dissipate. When we get down and dirty, you won't be able to see 12 feet around you. The skyline was a bright crimson red, which the soldiers on both sides felt was a very ominous sign. And it was, by the way. And at 4 p.m., attention! Over 20,000 traps rattling down the line. That's cartridge box accoutrements, fixed bayonets. Over 20,000 clickings going down the line. The 5th Confederate was sure that Cleburne was 5th Confederate was sure that Cleburne sought them out. He didn't. It just happened by chance. But 20 years later, they're sure that he was seeking them out. And at 4 p.m., 20,018 brigades, 100 regiments, musical bands are playing in perfect order. They move right down the open field to immortality. Bob Parker, he's gone now, God rest his soul. He told me, I never saw the source, but he told me that there was an Irishman with a top hat in front of Cleburne's playing a fiddle. Not a fiddle, a flute, playing a flute, doing a jig as they are in front. I've never read that, but Bob Parker told me that. But this is the only attack of the whole American Civil War where musical bands were playing an attack. Never occurred at Shiloh, Gettysburg, Antietam, Chickamauga, anywhere. And one Irish, not Cleburne's command, but one Irish Confederate soldier, Cockrell's Missourians, yelled out about the musical bands playing. This is the only battle I ever remembered when the tutors and the shooters went in together. How could I make up a tutor and a shooter? Huh? I'm not intelligent enough to make that up. Cleburne Division, I want to repeat, Granbury's Hardened Texas Brigade, 1,100 rifles, Govans to their right about 200-yard, 150-yard gap. Larry's in reserve about 400-yard gap as they're moving forward. And 100 battle flags, rabbits, quail and doves flying in from the air. The rabbits run out in front. It's magnificent. Believe it or not, some of the best sources that begin from the federal side. One of them, because they're looking at it, they're behind the trenches. One of them yelled out, "This is worth $500. See this? That's $35,000 a day." Another one yelled out, "You couldn't see this in 12 lifetimes." Another one yelled out, "This worth 10 years of my life just to see this." And another one yelled out, "Even though they are the enemy, for this moment, oh, I have admiration for them." That's the beautiful part. There's no one hurt yet. That's the part I'd live in as a little boy. I'd run up and down my yard yelling because I'm in the attack. I'm going to make the difference, but I'm going to live in the pretty part. As a little boy, I didn't know about the horrors of this terrible day, what's going to happen here. The advance line crushed half a mile south. Now the human shield running toward the trenches. Federal. You can't shoot your own men. Now Cleburne's division on the right side of the road. Cleburne's mounted. He rides down the line. He gives an order to Benham, I believe, and then he comes. He says, "It's too late. It's too late," because I think he's trying to exploit that breakthrough. And of course, 100 yards from the pike, Columbia Pike, 40 to 50 in front of the cotton gin, maybe 81st. That first horse was mortally wounded and runs upon the trench line and dies. He's trying to mount a second horse when an artillery shell disembowels the poor animal. Now at the moment of his destiny, as they said earlier, on foot waving his cap called Kepi sword drum, disappears in that smoke when that mini ball traveling 1,108 feet a second hits him right below the heart, goes through him like tissue paper. I hope he's dead before he hits the ground. If not, just seconds on that ground as this thing is raging. All the color guard of 7th Texas shot down and captured. General H.B. Granbury from Texas, who Cleburne called a band of heroes. Last words were, "Forward, men, forward. Never let it be said Texans lag in a fight." Took it right in the cheek, went out the back of his head, fell to his knees, hands to his face, died in that position. Around him was Lieutenant Colonel R.B. Young and also Chaplain Stokes, Lieutenant Stokes as well, who brother of Mary Gay, and Dr. Richardson of Granbury's Texas Brigade. Please forgive me. Jackson Hawkins Hawkeye Griffin, 46-year-old Texan, fought at the Battle of San Jacinto, 25th Texas, dismounted cav. He would die there, had 3 children and a wife. A Chinese Confederate soldier, 100% documented, from Shanghai, China. Charles Chan would die by the cotton gin. They did a newspaper article on him in Franklin in the past, and I met his descendant that came from California and to visit his grave. He was born in Shanghai. They didn't know why he went to Texas. Captured early war at Arkansas Post, sent to that hellhole called Camp Douglas, who a federal doctor called it a extermination camp. Exchanged and fought at the very end, buried in grave number 66 of the Texas section. Govan's Arkansas Brigade, all the color bearers of 4th and 13th, 5th and 19th Arkansas color bearers all shot down and captured. The Lieutenant Mintz, 5th Arkansas, was in the trenches. He felt a mini ball hit him somewhere about through here, blinded him for life. He could feel water in the ditches. He went to drink, he could taste the blood. It's running in streams, making rivulets as it flows, quote unquote. Larry's Brigade now coming up. All the color guard, 33rd Alabama shot down and captured. 45th Alabama shot down and captured. The 6th Arkansas of Govans and the 16th Alabama is going right through the gut, and we'll pick up with that in a while. And the 5 to 7 foot ditches on the southern side, stabbing between the over on top, pulling each other over by hair and uniform, throwing rocks, dirt clods, and sticks at each other. The dying and wounded are screaming with insanity, coming through the gut, right the center. 6 Arkansas, Major Meek carrying those colors. I'm almost sure it's him. Only 2 majors killed in that center. Holman is on the west side of the road. He has the colors of the 6 Arkansas. In a counterattack, 24th Wisconsin, Lieutenant Colonel Arthur MacArthur, Some call him a major. He's shot off his horse, rose to his feet. They eye each other. They come to each other. Major Meek shoots MacArthur in the chest with the second wound. He falls again. He thought the man was dead. He wasn't. He looks to the south, waving the man through the breakthrough. He's looking away. MacArthur rises to his feet, runs a Confederate major completely through with a sword. He falls to his knee, dying to shoot MacArthur in the right kneecap. Both men are thought to be mortally wounded. Meek dies. MacArthur lives to be the daddy of famous general of World War II fame, General Douglas MacArthur. And I found out, I just became aware about 8 years ago, I knew Douglas was born in Little Rock, Arkansas, I think 1881, I'm not sure the date. But guess who birthed him? A doctor in Cleburne's division that was in the Battle of Franklin. And he birthed the man, yeah. And that irony, and that a lot of irony there. Yeah. This is, so finally, it's a lot. It's not just about Cleburne's vision today in Cleburne. It dies down about 9 o'clock. 11:30, 1:30, the Federal Army's gone to Nashville, left the dead, most of the wounded, including James Coghlan. Who is James Coghlan? A federal staff officer for General Jacob D. Cox. Why do I note him? Atlanta campaign, he was captured. He was marched by Cleburne's tent. Cleburne saw his lieutenant. He shared his dinner with him, sent him all the way with the provost. The provost took his hat, blanket, and boots. Well, Cleburne became aware of that. I think he was probably ticked off. And he gave that man a blanket, a pair of boots, and a hat. And, of course, he died right in front of Cleburne, virtually. And at the surrender at Greensboro, North Carolina, General Cox made sure to find what was left of Cleburne's. He said, your officer died as I knew he preferred to die, leading his men. He was very kind to my staff officer. I was always grateful for that. Here's a wagon with food, and I hope he can get you home without starving to death. Kindness begets kindness, doesn't it? Next morning, Cleburne's laying on his back with his kepi semi over his face. They place him in a wagon with General John Adams, the roommate of George Pickett, West Point, Class 46, and taken over to Carrington Plantation. They laid them on the porch. Cleburne, Straw, Granberry. Gist was not there. He died at 8 o'clock that night. And Adams. And two staff officers, Lieutenant R.B. Young and Lieutenant Marshall Straw's staff. And they placed a handkerchief that his fiancee had made for him, PRC, over his face. And the men were howling. He not just his vision. He was a hero of the Army. And they placed him in a wagon and taken to Columbia, Tennessee. They placed him in a walnut coffin made by Elijah Neely. A poem was laid on that coffin that Naomi Hayes had written, the niece of President Polk. Blow ye breezes softly o'er him. Fan his brow with gentle breath. Disturb him not his sleepful slumber. Cleburne sleeps the sleep of death. Rest thee, Cleburne, tears of sadness. Flotsam hearts thou nobly won. Memory ne'er cease to cherish deeds of glory thou hast done. His fiancee was working in an herb garden. She heard about the newspaper boy yelled out about the losses Franklin, including General Cleburne, killed. She fainted in the garden they had become engaged in. Wouldn't leave her room, wore black for the next 2 years. She did get married, would become married, but and she died shortly thereafter. Not from the marriage, of course, but shortly thereafter, not too long after that. And Cleburne was resting at St. John's Episcopal Church for 5 years. And on April 26th of 1870, his adopted home of Helena, Arkansas, and he was a Masonic Mason, 33rd degree, and the whatever you call him, head of the worshipful master or something like that. But his adopted home, they wanted him to come back home. And at Memphis, Jefferson Davis was on that ship, along with Patton Anderson. I think General Cheatham was there, and there's a soldier with one arm asked if he could approach the coffin, and he and I think he knelt and never want to dry there. They took him to Helena at the church and the services, and there he rests today on Crowley's Ridge, a beautiful monument, and it has Shiloh, Franklin, Chickamauga, Farmington, and Missionary Ridge on that monument. I think Richmond too. And they raised money for that monument, and a Catholic federal chaplain would help raise money for that. And also there was a black man. Anyway, he sent $2.50 for that monument. And with a letter that said, I will never forget the kindness General Cleburne showed me on the streets of Helena, Arkansas, when as a little boy I was peddling apples, quote unquote. $2.50, a lot of money in the 1880s. That's a lot of money back then. And how many of you have ever read his document about freeing the slaves? Google it, read it. It's a magnificent, it's illuminary. Even General Hood said he was way ahead of his time. He correctly noted that they will fight, they'll make good soldiers, it will take time to train them. He gave examples how they fought in the history of the world at Greece and Jamaica and a bunch of different areas, Rome. And he said, if we don't do this, we're going to lose this war. And our children would be taught by their school books, their versions of the war, by their northern teachers, and our veterans will be and heroes will be objects of ridicule and derision. Well, I'm afraid to say I think he was right on that one, wasn't he? Yeah. And I think I sent this to Mike with that thing with that Confederate soldier, Confederate cavalryman on a horse has a doll behind him. He's riding home, and his little daughter's out there in the snow getting to see, and he's wearing this doll, and it says to the effect there, don't don't defend your relatives to people that hate you and hate them. Why even do that? They don't have to be defended. They gave everything they had, and we'll defend them when we can. But those people that hate them and just vile and talk, what's the point? I mean, I'm not going to talk to people like that. They gave everything they had and suffered so much. And forget the battles, the camp life, the marching, the disease, the filth. Uh, uh, I mean, I don't see how anybody lived hardly. The food. So and they gave everything they had. And by the way, so many went home and died. So many went. Needs to be a book on that. So many went home and died. 2 Confederate generals in the Battle of Franklin died from their wounds after the war. That's a deserves a book. So they don't count them whatsoever. They're not counted whatsoever as being lost in the war. Henry H. Harmeyer, Dents, Alabama battery. He was a German from immigrant New Orleans. He was shot in the chest. The Bible saved him, boy. But glass eye bullet hit him there. The bullet's still in the head. He consented to operation on February 15th of 1912, and the next day he died from that operation. To my knowledge, the last man to die from the Battle of Franklin. But so many went home and died within months, or a few years later, from their germs and disease. And they gave everything they had, including their lives. And I think they earned, and as you know, they've earned the right to be remembered. And they gave everything they had. And I think, when I'm having a bad day, having a bad couple of days, and I might even get a little whiny at times, or I yell at my German Shepherd. That's when it's really bad. I think about these brave men gave everything they had, ate food you wouldn't feed your dog. You would not feed your dog the food they had to eat at times. They made a joke. This is a joke, keep them crying. Does everyone here know what hardtack is? If not, it's a cracker. The soldiers called it tooth dullers. You had to put it in coffee or put it on. But there's a joke, but really, because it's so sad, they said one day a man was biting into a piece of hardtack. He bit into something soft. What was it, a worm? He goes, no, it was a 10-penny nail, quote unquote. Sam Watkins would make a joke about trying to eat rats. That's not funny. Tastes like chicken, by the way. Tastes like chicken. What he write? Why this place? Hold on. I got to hold on. After this wonderful meal, I have to do this. While stationed at this place, Chattanooga, rations are rather scarce and hard to come by. Perhaps the economy on the part of our generals and commissaries is here rather scant rations. Acting upon this information, we set out rat hunting, but we couldn't find any rats. Presently, we came to this old outhouse that seemed a natural harbor for this vermin. We quickly tore down the house, and out jumped the old resider, old and gray. I suppose Mr. Rat been chased before. Well, we chased him backwards and forwards until the rat got tired of his foolishness and he headed for his hole. But the tail's the last thing to go in that hole. We made a grab of that tail. Tail hole broke, and the skin of that tail was left in our hands. After a while, we caught him. We skinned him, washed him, buttered him, salted him, battered him, peppered him, and fried him. And the rat actually looked good. The delicate aroma of frying rat came to our nostrils. We were keen for rat. Our teeth were on edge. Our mouth watered for rat. After a while, they said he was done. I got me a cold corn dodger, put that little piece of rat on it. Right, I ate a little corn dodger, brought that rat up my mouth. When I happened to think of that, rat still did slip. I did not eat rat that night. I did not eat rat that morning. I thought my first and last time to ever eat a dead rat. He's making a joke. Isn't that those tragic? You're eating rats. Eating. Oh my God. But that's how hungry they were. They gave everything they had, and I'm honored to have them in my life. I wish the war hadn't occurred. I wish the battle hadn't occurred. I wish all these brave people, brave men would have been alive. Look at the children. Everything would have, but they did. They had to do what they had to do, and they didn't do it for hate. They did it. They fought this war for love of home, family, and country, and gave their lives for it. And so God bless the Army of Tennessee. God bless the Confederate soldiers that gave everything they had. Army of Northern Virginia, Trans-Mississippi, Nathan Bedford Forrest Command that gave everything they had. And God bless them. And they'll always, 150 years from now, I won't be remembered. They will. They will. Pat Cleburne will. And your relatives, you'll pass down the stories of all your relatives to your kinfolk on down the lines. And 100 years from now, they'll still remember your ancestors that gave everything they had. On Cleburne's monument in closing, it says, "Deus et decorum pro pata mora." It is good and sweet to die for one's country. Thank you so much for allowing me the honor, pleasure, and privilege to be here. Aaron go bra. Aaron go bra.
Right. God bless you, brother. Wonderful.
Thank you so much, Mike.
The Honorable Thomas Cartwright, thank you again, sir. Appreciate you. Come see him after the meeting. Look at his stuff. It's wonderful, wonderful what that man knows. Second Lieutenant James Kirby, raise your hand in the back by the curtain. Everybody see that man by the curtain? Beautiful red suspenders and red tie. He is going to collect the money from the silent auction. You just got volunteered. In 5 minutes, the auction will close. But see him if you want an item and pay him. He'll collect the greenbacks from you. If you don't have the money tonight, that's okay. Send it to us later. But make sure you take your item home tonight. In closing.
Is the collector of the money, myself,
Yes, sir.
able to bid on the auction?
Absolutely.
Okay.
In 5 minutes. After we'll call it 8:30 is the close of the silent auction, okay? By the way, after we're done this evening, when all the festivities are done and the fellowship's done, we're going to strike this tent. This was a bare barn when we started yesterday evening, except for the white decorations and the chandeliers. They were here. If you can stay and help, it'll come down a lot quicker. Jack Looper provided all the art print hung on the walls, and several people contributed to the tabletops and the flags. So if you can stick around and help, we'd appreciate it. If you can't, thank you so much for coming. I've read this a couple times, but it's so worth reading because of what these men sacrificed, men and women sacrificed for us. They're not some distant figures in a history book. These were our families, okay? This is my favorite poem. It's called The Confederate Note, and it's written in War Songs and Poems of the Southern Confederacy by an ex-Confederate. Brother Cartwright grew up with this book. It's a fascinating novel, full of good stuff. This was written by Major S.A. Jonas of Mississippi and supposedly was written on the back of a Confederate note after Appomattox. He said this, "Representing nothing on God's earth now and not in the water below it, as a pledge of the nation that's dead and gone, keep it, dear friend, and show it. Show it to those who will lend an ear to the tale that this paper can tell of liberty born, of patriots' dream, of the storm-cradled nation that fell. Too poor to possess the precious ores and too much of a stranger to borrow, we issue today our promise to pay and hope to redeem on the morrow. The days rolled on and the weeks became years, but our coffers were empty still. Coin was so rare that the treasury quaked if $1 should drop in the till. But the faith that was in us
was strong indeed, and our poverty well discerned. And these little checks represented the pay that our volunteers had earned. We know it had hardly value in gold, yet as gold her soldier received it. It gazed in our eyes with a promise to pay, and each patriot soldier believed it. But our boys thought little of price of pay or of bills that were ever due. We knew if it brought us bread today, 'twas the best our poor country could do. Keep it, for it tells our history o'er, from the birth of its dreams to the last, modest and born of the angel hope, like the hope of success it passed. Please stand for our benediction. Following the benediction, we'll sing Dixie. Heavenly Father, thank you so much for the time we've had tonight. Thank you for all the hands that contributed, all the miles traveled, all the work and thought that was put into this evening. Because it's a great cause, Lord, we know that you led men in the past for glorious reasons to honor you, to honor your name, to bring honor to your cause of religious, righteous freedom. Because we know it comes from you. So, Lord, help us never to forget that these men were honoring you and what they did. Help us to follow in their footsteps, to follow you, and to do as you called us to do. Lord, I ask your blessings on everyone here, everyone watching online tonight. We ask your special touch on Commander Ed Butler and his wife. Help them, strengthen them, help them to know that you've still got their back and they're still pleasing you. Help them to finish strong and keep marching towards the goal. Help us all to have traveling mercies home tonight. Bless our visitors as they travel back across the states. And Lord, help us to remember to always honor you. In Jesus' holy name we pray. Amen. I wish I was in the land of cotton, are not forgotten. Look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. In Dixieland where I was born, early on one frosty morning, look away, look away, look away, Dixieland. Then I wish I was in Dixie, hooray, hooray. In Dixieland I'll take my stand to live and die in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. Away, away, away down south in Dixie. God bless you all. Thank you so much.